Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, I go to war with the state of Major League Baseball's umpiring. I'll also discuss what happened in the series against the Minnesota Twins and a solid homestand for the Philadelphia Phillies, all things considered. We'll talk about the changes in the rotation with the six-man rotation, and is it actually hurting the Philadelphia Phillies starting pitchers? And finally, got a little Monday off the poll for you since it's an off night for the Phillies. A lot of stuff to get into, so let's get started on today's episode of Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm Connor Thomas, your host. Thank you so much for checking us out for another episode. Appreciate everyone. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can hear me also on the radio, see me on television here in the Philadelphia sports market. Check me out everywhere. 2 years credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member, and happy to be here as your host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing wherever you consume your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube. If you've already done all that stuff, I really appreciate you following along with Locked On Phillies. If you haven't done all that stuff, please do. But I also appreciate you checking in and everything like that. So thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in to Locked On Phillies. Really appreciate you guys. It's an off night for the Philadelphia Phillies. So that means we can get into a little bit more today before we preview a series with the Toronto Blue Jays. That's just a short 2-game set. Before we jump into the episode, I want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Tell you more about Game Time in just a little bit. But I got to get into the state of Major League Baseball umpiring. So yesterday, the Philadelphia Phillies take on the Minnesota Twins in the rubber match of their 3-game series. They smacked them on Friday night, hung 13 on them, and then they got smacked on Saturday and lost by a large margin to the Minnesota Twins. And then you have yesterday's game, and the Phillies' offense was quiet the last 2 games. That's on them, totally. I'm not going to go ahead and say, okay, well, the Phillies lost that series and that game because of umpiring. There's more the Philadelphia Phillies could have done. There's more Kyle Schwarber could have done, and there's more a couple of the guys could have done. You could have gotten slightly better pitching at points, all this stuff. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it more than just one call by one umpire. But it's too much of a trend this year for Major League Baseball that the umpiring is just absolutely terrible. If you're not familiar with what happened, Alec Bohm was up in the 7th inning with Alex McKay behind the plate. Alex McKay, if you're not familiar with his name, is a call-up umpire from the minor leagues. So he gets called up. He gets home plate in Game 3 of the series between the Minnesota Twins and the Philadelphia Phillies, and a pitch that was clearly inside that would have been ball 4 with the bases loaded and walked in a run for the Philadelphia Phillies against the Minnesota Twins in what was, at the time, a 2-0 ball game. 2-0? Maybe even, 2-0 ball game. That's game-changing. That's terrible. It cannot happen. The pitch was not a strike. I know I already got some responses from people saying, well, Bohm needs to know to swing there to defend against maybe a bad call from the umpire. No, you don't. You really don't. Like, that was not a strike. And I'll tell you what, I looked at Alex McKay's umpire scorecard this morning, and actually, he was really good when you look at percentage-wise, which makes this call even worse. Because if he had been giving that inside strike all day, then you can make the argument and say, okay, well, Bohm needs to know to swing at that. He called an inside strike on Schwarber. He called an inside strike on Turner. He called an inside strike on like a couple guys for the Twins and everything like that. And then you could go ahead and say, okay, well, Bohm needs to recognize where the zone's at. No, the zone was consistent until the biggest point of the game, and then it wasn't, and it cost the Philadelphia Phillies a chance to win that ball game. It certainly cost them a run. And Alec Bohm was ejected for throwing his helmet down and yelling at the umpire. Then Bryce Harper had a bad call in the next inning, and Harper would have come up with the bases loaded. There's a chance that you could have seen 2 walks. Now, I don't believe Bryce Harper's call that was a strike 3 called would have been a 4th ball either. I don't think it was a full count when that call was made, but still. I mean, you get Bryce Harper up with the bases loaded in that situation with the pressure on. Who knows how that goes? And you take that opportunity away from the Philadelphia Phillies on a ball that was, I don't know, 3 inches off the inside of the plate. And that might not sound like a lot, but that's enough when it comes to bad pitches in baseball for that to be an egregious miss. I know there's people chuckling out there about the way I phrased that. Forget about that. We're focused on MLB umpires right now. And it's terrible. I mean, the Phillies have seen so many bad calls. They've seen a play at first base on a double play against the Nationals where the first baseman was in the air way off the bag as the base runner, I forget who it was, ran through the bag and they called him out. We had to go to a review. I mean, plays at second base that were absolutely terrible. A pickoff call on that same one. Oh, yeah, because it was Castellanos. Castellanos was safe. And we're like, dude, what are you calling? And then there's a pickoff play, and he calls him out there, and the Phillies review it again, and he's safe. I mean, there's just too many call-up umpires. There's too many inconsistent umpires. There's too many guys like Angel Hernandez, who now I know he hasn't been umpiring this year, and I think he might have come back. But, I mean, there's just too many guys. C.B. Buckner, guys that are just notorious for being terrible at their jobs that are allowed to continue to have jobs in Major League Baseball because of the union situation with the umpires and MLB's unwillingness to do anything. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm anti-robot umpire, but if I keep seeing more of this, like I'm going to be forced to accept it as reality because this is unacceptable for Major League Baseball. And a product worth this much money that's gained this much stature this year with the fan base. So many more people are watching baseball this year because of the new rules. It's such a glaringly good thing for baseball to have done what they did this offseason. And the umpires are trying to undo all of it by just being absolutely terrible. The only other time I could think of a state of officiating that's been this bad is years ago in the NFL when NFL officials went on strike and they had to bring in replacement refs who had never refereed at that level, and they were terrible. And we had some of like the worst calls of all time. And that's what this season feels like for baseball. And that's not an excuse because the umpires aren't on strike. No, you've got a lot of guys who have been umpires for a long time in this league. And there's just too many terrible calls. The strike zone, no one knows where it is. The base umpiring, terrible. You need to institute something. Now, here's what I'll say. I think that there's a middle ground between clear robot umps at home plate and what is currently going on with terrible umpiring. And Alex McKay being the most recent example of that. Just absolutely awful. If he doesn't umpire another Phillies game, I'll have no issue with that. No issue with that whatsoever. He drove me insane this weekend. I was yelling at the TV, losing my mind. I know most of Philadelphia was doing the same. It was just a terrible call. But I'm not pro robot umpire because I do think the human element adds something to the game. It shouldn't in that moment. But if you're like, for example, I don't know, an umpire has a slightly lower strike zone, or he likes to call a breaking ball down a strike, and you have to determine that. I think that's a little bit of something that could be part of the game as long as it's consistent. Alex McKay was not consistent yesterday. And that's what bothered me more than anything. But they have a system in the minor leagues where if a pitch is called a ball or a strike and the batter does, a pitch is called a strike and the batter doesn't agree, he'd be able to challenge the call. I believe pitchers can do it as well, but you only get a certain number per game. I saw it when I was down at a Durham Bulls game this summer when I was down for a vacation in North Carolina, and all the batter does, it's super quick. Taps his helmet, checks out. They check it. It takes about 2-3 seconds away from the game. The call is either confirmed or overturned based on the virtual strike zone that you see on TV every day, and you move on. It would have been so simple. Alec Bohm wouldn't have been ejected. He would have been like, dude, are you insane? That's not a strike. Check that. Up, ball. Phillies get a run. Bryce Harper, bases loaded. I think that's the next logical step for Major League Baseball. They've proven this year that sweeping changes can really help the game, so they shouldn't be afraid to do it. They've already implemented it in the minor leagues, so there's a little bit of a test, like a sample size to work with there. That needs to happen because I'm tired of umpires like McKay and others costing teams fair shots to win game by being just bad at their job to the point where they should not be umpiring a major league game. And also, I saw this. I forget who initially came up with the idea, but I agree with it. Sorry to not give you credit, not trying to steal it if you're watching or listening to this, but home plate should not be a privilege for call-up umpires. If you are not a regular, everyday major league umpire, when your point in the rotation comes up to be behind home plate, you get skipped and it goes to the next guy. Because these call-up umpires, they're bad enough in the field at points. You can't have them behind home plate. It impacts the game way too much. And that just drove me insane about the Philadelphia Phillies with the Minnesota Twins series. They had a real chance to end up winning that series, and it got taken away from them by McKay and a terrible call. And Citizens Bank Park let them know. Twitter let them know. But it's unacceptable for Major League Baseball to let that continue much further. And it's not just the Phillies. It's across baseball. I don't want to make it seem like, oh, the Phillies are the only team that gets screwed by this. No. It happens to every team. It's happened to teams that the Phillies are playing. And it's just like, that's a terrible call. How does that ever happen? Umpiring is just, I haven't seen it in this sorry of a state probably in my lifetime when it comes to Major League Baseball. And something needs to be done soon to fix this. It really does. You're going to start losing fans because of it. Not me, though, of course, because I'm your host of Locked On Phillies, and I got to be locked in on the Phillies to get you guys good Phillies information. Did I say Phillies enough in there? Well, coming up, we're going to talk a little bit more about the actual games of the series, the starting pitching, and with this six-man rotation, I wonder if there's something going on where maybe they're getting too much rest. Maybe it's making guys uncomfortable. Zack Wheeler kind of said something to that effect in an article with The Athletic that came out this morning that I'm going to reference coming up. It's just an interesting little conversation about where the Philadelphia Phillies are. And since they have an off day tonight, it is the perfect time for interesting conversations. We'll discuss that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. First, though, I want to tell you about my friends over at Game Time. All right. The Phillies just went through a long homestand. A lot of great games there, and they're going to have still a bunch of home games the rest of the way. Short road trip right now, but that's okay. You don't have to plan now. You can forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Game Time guarantee. It means you're going to always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Game Time's going to credit you 110% of the difference. Not just 100%, 110%. That's how confident they are. You'll get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You buy tickets in a matter of seconds, just 2 taps and you're set, and the tickets come right to your phone. You don't have to root through your email or wait for some random dude in Ames, Iowa to text you that he's emailed you the tickets. No, not at all. You get everything taken care of with Game Time. It's super easy. So, for example, I don't know, I was talking to someone at the bar yesterday, and they have a couple days off of work they weren't expecting. Maybe you want to go to Toronto and watch a couple games up there, the Rogers Center. You can use Game Time for that. Get it done right now, and you could be at tomorrow night's game. It's perfectly easy. Go ahead and check it out because Game Time is the easiest way to buy tickets. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Oh, and download the Game Time app. And guess what? You create an account and use code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. $25 tickets, you get them for $5. $100 tickets, you get them for $80. It's just, you know how to subtract by 20. Bottom line is it's a great deal. So, again, use code LOCKEDONMLB. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Terms apply. And download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Phillies will take on the Blue Jays tomorrow night, 7:07 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can listen to every pitch of the Phillies' hometown radio broadcast of that game on the Sirius XM app. Just go to the SXM app and search Phillies. We're going to preview that short 2-game set tomorrow. So tomorrow morning, I'm going to work on that episode to get everything all squared away for that. No need to do it today, of course, because an off night tonight. But I want to jump back into what kind of went on in the Twins series and what to discuss with the starting pitching. Now, when you look at the way that the games played out, the starting pitching in Game 1 looked really good. You end up winning 13-2. I mean, that's just a very comfortable, strong win for the Philadelphia Phillies. Super fun. Offense was popping. Everything was great. You're like, okay, the Phillies are on a magical run. That game, of course, started by Christopher Sanchez, ends up getting the win. Nice job by him. The run support certainly helped. I think what happened is all those games that Christopher Sanchez was losing when he had like a 2 ERA, they saved all those runs for that one game against the Twins. So, well, I guess that works. And then the Twins hang 8 on the Philadelphia Phillies in Game 2. You have Taijuan Walker with the loss, who's now going to get some extra time between starts, Rob Thompson said, to kind of rest. That makes sense a little bit. I'll explain why. And then Ranger Suarez had Game 3. And he ended up getting the loss, but he didn't pitch bad. It was a 3-0 game. I mean, he was giving up some hits. The Twins had 10 hits on the day. But he battled. He's getting more into being himself again. I thought his stuff looked better than it has in previous games. I thought Aaron Nola's last start, his stuff looked better in previous games. So how could too much rest be hurting these guys? Well, I think you have to look at the big-time innings-eating starting pitchers. Nola is one of those guys, but he's been struggling this year. But Taijuan Walker and Zack Wheeler, these guys are just big-bodied, strong guys that like to get out there every 4 to 5 days and throw. And when you don't do that, they might get out of rhythm. Zack Wheeler was talking in a recent article with The Athletic that came out. Shout out to Matt Gelb, who covers the Phillies for The Athletic, put this article out this morning. I was reading through it. And Wheeler says he likes to. It's just a personal preference. He wasn't speaking for the rest of the rotation, but he's like, I like to get out there every 4 to 5 days. And when it goes longer than that, I'm paraphrasing here, but when it goes longer than that, it's like it bothers him. He doesn't feel like he's in his routine, is what the sentiment he was conveying in that article to Matt Gelb. Again, go check out The Athletic if you don't have a subscription. Go ahead and check it out. It's worth getting one because you get good information in writing on the Philadelphia Phillies. I'll reference it every once in a while on this podcast, but they do great work. They deserve your patronage as well. But anyway, bottom line is Wheeler kind of echoed that. And Walker has been kind of looking not himself over the past couple starts. And Suarez is trying to work his way back. And maybe it's good for him to get more opportunity. I don't know if they can play it by ear and just say these guys are going to get extra rest because of the way the schedule breaks out, or we're going to skip a start for this guy, or Michael Lorenzen needs some time because he went deep in a couple games, which is something that is happening as we speak because he's going to have a long rest because of these 2 off days in between starts. All this stuff gets really tricky, right? And Zack Wheeler's comments make it interesting. Is the extra rest hurting the starting Philadelphia Phillies rotation? Now, I don't think that's something that I'm worried about right now at this point. I think it was just a weird series against the Twins. I think largely the starting pitching was good. 2 out of 3 games, you had good enough starting pitching that you could have won. The offense just fell asleep in games 2 and 3. And Taijuan Walker had a rough start in game 2. Gave up however many runs were earned for him. I was in a wedding this weekend, so it's a little bit fuzzy what exactly days were what. But Walker's final line in that one, he ended up giving up 3 earned runs. So not a whole lot, but enough that it was 3 earned runs in 5 innings. The bullpen kind of imploded. The offense wasn't doing much, all that stuff. I just worry that the sentiment Zack Wheeler has is shared by multiple pitchers in this rotation. And if they feel like they need to pitch every 4 or 5 days, well, that means one of 2 things. Someone is going to have to skip a start, and that pitcher is going to be out of rhythm, or someone's going to have to go to the bullpen. Now, that may just be a matter of preference with routine, and they might soldier through it and be fine. And this could be a huge benefit down the stretch because they get extra rest and they're more comfortable heading into the postseason with where their arms are. Or it could be that they get out of a rhythm and the Phillies start struggling, and then you have to bring them back in and start throwing them every day, and then you don't get the benefit you thought you're getting from a 6-man rotation. I don't know. It's kind of like I was talking about this at the bar the other day, so it was fresh on my mind. It's kind of like an organ transplant, right? Seems to make sense. You need a kidney, you got a kidney. Your other kidney has to stop working as hard as it does, and you're much healthier for it. Sometimes the body rejects that. Sometimes it gets you used to something. It's just like doesn't like the new organ. Not that, and I guess the new organ, the new kidney in this thing, in this instance, would be Michael Lorenzen. New kidney itself is working fine. That you get what I'm saying by the analogy, though, right? Sometimes an idea seems like the perfect thing you need, and sometimes you try it with people and they don't like it. It looks like it makes all the sense in the world, but people are weird, and pitchers are definitely weird. Trust me, I know. So maybe what they're more comfortable with is a 5-man. You'll see that right now, still a 6-man rotation. They're just getting extra rest for guys when it comes up in the rotation that it's their turn to get extra rest. It could pay dividends in the long run. In the short term, though, I'm getting a little bit iffy on the whole strategy and everything. Right now, I'd still stick with it, but something to keep an eye on, especially considering Wheeler's comments about how it makes him feel and how Rob Thompson employs this rotation. He's been better with the bullpen, even though Dylan Covey should not have been in that game, a 2-run game. Whatever. He's been better with the bullpen lately, and the lineup is starting to get kind of figured out. We'll talk more about Kyle Schwarber in tomorrow's episode and what he needs to do better, but I don't know. Just something that popped up on my radar and something I wanted to bring up to you to keep an eye on. Again, Phillies Blue Jays, 7:07 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow night, off night tonight on Monday. Go ahead and check that game out on the SiriusXM app. Just go to the SXM app and search Phillies. You'll be able to pull up everything there. Coming up, we're going to do a little Monday off the poll. I'm going to throw out a poll question to you and explain exactly what that is if you're not familiar with that segment. We'll do that coming up next as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. All right, yes, it is time for Off the Poll. What Off the Poll is I'm going to pose a question to you here, give you a couple options. Then I'm going to tweet out a Twitter poll from my account at ConnorThomas975, which you can see right over here on the screen if you're looking, and I'll tweet it out. It'll be from at Locked On Phillies, at LO_Phillies, Locked On Phillies Twitter account. So you can find it either of those places, and I'll respond to it in tomorrow's episode. So I'm not going to give you my thoughts today. I don't want to bias you with whatever you might be voting on. If I say, oh, I really like this option of the poll, you might not like my opinion and be like, oh, I'm picking something different now. Or you might be swayed by mine. No, I want your full unbiased opinion. So we'll get into that. One more time, Locked On Phillies. Locked On Phillies. The Philadelphia Phillies take on the Toronto Blue Jays in Toronto, 7:07 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go ahead and check out every pitch of the Phillies' hometown radio broadcast of that game on the Sirius XM app. Just go to the SXM app and search Phillies. Now, my off the poll question for this Monday, normally I'd say this weekend. We usually do the segment on Friday, but I figured I'd fit it in with a couple off days this week. My off the poll question to you is going to be about the biggest worry about the Philadelphia Phillies right now. A lot of people were upset about Kyle Schwarber, so he's going to definitely be one of the options. You get 4 options on this one. So Kyle Schwarber will be there. I'm going to go ahead and put, let's say, health. And when I say health, I mean like injury issues with Jose Alvarado still not back, with Christian Pache still not back, with Brandon Marsh missing some time. Can Bryce Harper continue to play first base? Stuff like that. So I'll just put health in general. But just know when you check that out, the health of the team means like any worry about potential injuries down the stretch or wear and tear and stuff like that. I'm going to throw Aaron Nola in there again because really the rest of the starting pitchers have all shown good flashes for stretches of this year besides him. So I'm going to throw Nola in there. And then I'll throw in, let's see. What else? I'll also go Rob Thompson's lineups. So biggest concern with the Phillies right now is going to be Schwarber, health, Aaron Nola, or Rob Thompson's lineups. And we'll put that all together for you. And you can pick which one bothers you the most when it comes to the Philadelphia Phillies and how they're currently standing. What could possibly cause them headaches down the stretch of the Major League Baseball season? And we'll jump into the responses to that in the final segment of tomorrow's episode. So the poll will be up for about 24 hours. You'll get a chance to get in there and vote. And we'll recap, and I'll give you my thoughts on what I would pick of those 4 when I go ahead and see the results of the poll. Don't worry, I'm not swayed by the results. I already know which one I would pick out of those 4, and I'm probably going to vote on it as well because I like my vote to be heard. I am still part of the fan base, But yes, we will get into that tomorrow. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies, though. Thank you so much for checking us out, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you're rating, reviewing wherever you get your podcasts, subscribing to the YouTube. That really helps me out. Seriously, anyone who's already done that, I thank you so much. If you haven't, it takes 2 seconds. Get you notifications when new episodes are posted. A great way to consume Locked On Phillies. So I appreciate anyone who's going to do that. And just thank you so much for checking us out. However, you check out Locked On Phillies. That's all for today. And I will talk to you next time on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.